Hey, we're here at Alfa Vedic Farm with Deb and our good friend Josh Bigelsen, who's been here for about a week or so. So, what do you think of the little farm here, our medicinal herb farm?
It's definitely nice and peaceful out here. See you guys up at the crack of dawn working every day on the farm is pretty cool too. And I'll wake up around mid-morning and jump in to see if I can help as well. But yeah, really nice out here.
And I think one takeaway for you that you learned here is to never volunteer.
We'll see what my paycheck is at the end of the week.
Did we tell you about volunteer, what that really means?
Happy to help.
No, it's been unbelievable. You've helped so much, and we're blessed. A lot of people come to the farm, and they always give a hand. But you've been extra helpful. So usually it's just Deb and I here, and we work long hours, and we're getting through things. But whenever you get an extra hand, it's a great morale booster for Deb and I.
Nice, yeah, I enjoyed helping.
Definitely.
I look forward to having something like this in the future, so it's good training for me.
Yeah.
So definitely enjoyed it.
So, any word from our farm mascot here?
Well, I think we ought to acknowledge that this is our initial launching of Friends at the Farm, shall we call it? Mm-hmm. And just talk about what's going on here and the goals that we've set for ourselves and what we've accomplished so far. And I think people might want to hear that because we get questions all the time from emails, people asking if they can come visit, what we're doing, how we're doing it. So we've been very blessed with a lot of great folks that have shown up here.
Yeah. And our mission statement here at the Alfa Vedic Medicinal Herb Farm, if folks don't know, is that we're creating a prototype for small farms, 5 to 10 acres, that can be duplicated, what we're doing here in every community across the country to kind of disperse the supply grid so that we aren't all centralized into one dependent system where we get our food, where we grow our herbs for medicine, and also just to reconnect people to the land, because that's the main thing that we've found here is that when people visit, from their typical urban dwellings, they really are out of touch. They appreciate it, but it takes them a little time to become comfortable because there's no cell service here. There's none of the typical amenities. But would you say that we're roughing it here? At the same
Not
time?
at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah, it took, I thought it would take me a few days to settle in here because I'm used to a lot more people, And yeah, as soon as I got here, I felt like the brain relaxed and said, oh, thank God I'm here. So settled right in. And then you jump on the river down there and it brings you right back home. Yeah. It forces you right back into your body in a lot of ways, So I've been loving it. I thought there would be more of an adjustment period, but no, it feels real nice. Feels like home.
Nice sleeping with the sound of the river. Huh?
Yep.
Deb and I, we have our windows wide open all the time, so we get the jungle noises outside, the river in the background, and
yep.
And I think most people wouldn't need to keep their sleep apnea machines and everything much longer if they lived in a proper environment.
Yep.
Also with abundant oxygen and just basically a lot of mana in the air. There's actually life force here that because everything is alive, you aren't surrounded by cement and power lines, and that really saps the energy that people really don't have a clue as far as how deep that goes.
Yeah. The brain definitely relaxed here, which is not the norm for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, no telephone wires, no stoplights, thank God. Nothing like that. No people honking their horns and neighbors coming over and bothering you. It was
except for us.
Well, present company excluded.
But I think for people that are tuning in for the first time, let them know we are living off grid. In Northern California, about 20 miles from the Oregon border, we are on the shore of the Smith River, and this has been an off-grid community always. There's no power back here. Once you turn off into the road that leads through the canyon, there's no power here except for those of us that we have solar panels, we have generators if and when needed in case of emergency, but we are very blessed to be in probably one of the most pristine spots in all of California. And we're native Californians, so we can testify this is really untouched back in this area.
And most critical is water. We have the cleanest river in the country, probably. It's just pristine. It looks tropical. It's so clear, except it's ice cold year round because a lot of it comes subterranean. So a lot of the river water is actually primal water. The water we drink squirts right out of the mountainside through miles of bedrock. That's definitely primal water. And it really makes a difference with what we grow here. You know, the plants aren't chlorinated, and you know it's structured the way nature intends it. So so that's important for farming. You know, Josh, you and I and Deb, you know, we have a kind of a parallel thread of experience. You grew up with your dad, who was very well known. I've known about him for years. I never really worked with him, but very well aware of his work, and now I'm learning more of the nuances of his work through you and your brother Adam. And you know, I've always just loosely called myself a bioterrain medicine physician, even though I integrate a lot of things. But the whole point is that I look at myself as an ecologist for the body. You're not treating disease, you're not treating germs, but instead you're understanding how to assess the environment, the internal environment of the body, and then put that right. And in my experience, things kind of get better more often than not, even though you're not in an adversarial role with treating the body as we, you know, come to expect with allopathic medicine. So maybe share a little bit of your experience. You know, we have kids that are just kind of in your age group. They grew up with Deb and I and what we were doing, treating people from all over the world, and you had a kind of a vantage point in your household too, seeing your dad, who practiced actually in some similar ways, and also hung out with some of the people that I hung out with in my early days. So what's it like growing up in that situation?
Oh, well, it was awesome. You know, there was the ups and downs of watching your dad help people and then get in trouble for it, you know, which is kind of altering my path a little bit to figure out what I really want to be doing. Because, he basically got crucified, and, you know, you've known people like this. It's happened to you even too. You know, it can be thankless sometimes, and you can kind of be on the island sometimes all by yourself. So at times it's been very isolating, but my upbringing was fantastic. I don't think I realized the magnitude of it, of what he'd been through, probably until 2014, when the last clinic got raided and shut down. And then we started to lecture, and I started to go back into his history, and we would talk about his history in the lectures, and you could really see all the stuff that he had been through. And, you know, he would break through here and do this really great thing, and then he'd be attacked. He'd break through here, do something really great, and then he'd be attacked. So it was a very interesting upbringing. I know we did that summit with you recently, and somebody asked us, when did we first learn about the terrain theory? And we said we never knew any different. This is just kind of what we grew up in. And it's been really nice being here because we've used a lot of analogies as far as the garden, the soil, and our body. It's the same thing. And, you know, we've been harping on, and I think you have too, that people think we're separate than nature as opposed to being a part of nature. And we have created a whole race of people that is separate than nature, you know, and they're not assisting nature, they're not supporting nature, and then we wondered why we're in having some of the problems that we're having. So to be here, you know, it's helping me connect some puzzle pieces as far as stories that we can start to incorporate. You know, the soil is key. If you have healthy soil, then good things grow. It's the same thing in our body. You know, we talk about parasites all the time. And I get offended these days when people are blaming things on parasites. The problem is your parasites. You know, somebody told me eye floaters are parasites in your eyeballs and things like that. It's just like, it kind of kills me a little bit, you know. So when we were talking, and you just talk about the soil, and no farmer is unhappy when there's worms in the garden. None. Right? So why is it any different than in our body? And this is an interesting question I want to ask you, Bear, because we've been using the isopathic remedies for a long time, the Sanum remedies. And for those of you that don't know, they are the waste product of germs. Ooh, scary germs, right? So, and the farmers explained it. It's easier to explain with soil than it is in the body because people understand it a little bit more. So I got to see Dr. Alan Williams speak, who is a great regenerative agriculturist, and he talked about, yep, in the soil, you've got the bacteria. There's nutrients in the soil, but you need the microbiology to process those nutrients. So the bacteria go in there and they clean everything up, and their waste product is nutrients for the soil. Same thing in our body. We have bacteria in there. It's helping to clean things up. The waste product is nutrients, and that's what those remedies were. So then they talked about when things get pathogenic, all right, which is one of Dad's Orwellian words. And to us, pathogenic is just out of balance. So when things become out of balance, the waste product of the bacteria just gets gobbled up by the other bacteria. So the soil or our body doesn't get to absorb the nutrients. So here the parasites come in. These wonderful parasites that are there to help your soil, externally and internally. So if they're processing the bacteria on a higher scale and processing more nutrients, I've been thinking recently, what about remedies that are using the waste product of parasites? Because we've done so well with the waste products of bacteria and fungus that if it's a higher scale of nutrients or larger scale, more nutrients, would that be something that could be really helpful to the human body?
Well, you and I know the answer to that. But sure, you know, the isopathics, if you understand, they are exactly what you just explained. You know, we talk about biology a lot and about chemistry, but the old timers, going back a few centuries, understood everything was about resonance. When I'm working on the farm here, I understand there's a whole resonance between our bodies and the soil, the plants. And when I practice acupuncture, I understand that the meridian system in the body is also a homeostatic mechanism to communicate our electrical system with the electrical system in the soil. So these organisms, when we take them in a supplemental form, they're the indigenous organisms in our body, and they actually morphologically change to meet any need that the body needs. So when you take them, if you have some of these organisms that have been doing a good job for us, scavenging and so forth, working in conjunction with other organisms such as so-called parasites. The only parasites I know of are not in the natural order. They're more out there in the banking system and places like that. But you have this communication between all of these natural organisms, and they will downregulate. In other words, the organisms that have been playing a scavenger role, if their job is done, the remedies will downregulate and put them back into their kind of waiting on the sideline as troops, you know, ready for action, or else they can actually upregulate. They also are repopulating in the event that a person's ecology is compromised, which most people are these days because of all the things we're inundated with. It repopulates these seeds, which are actually the seeds of life, is the way I look at them. They're roughly 0.01 microns in size. And so that is what in conventional thinking you'd call the immune system, but you and I know the immune system really isn't an immune system because there's nothing to be immune from. There's nothing to fight or struggle against. And what we're really doing is just reseeding those elements that make the ecology function the way it works. And I like to think of it as, my dad was a master mechanic, so I look at everything as a closed kinematic chain. That means if you're looking at a Swiss watch, every little gear depends on the other and they all move together. And it's the same thing in nature. If one little gear is affected in some way, whether it's microorganism, whether it's the elements that the microorganisms break down and make available in the soil, whether it's the parasites that are, we had slug issues here because we're surrounded by forest.
Yeah.
And this year we did some electroculture, and now the
Right.
slug population is down simply because we're harnessing more atmospheric energy, electricity, bringing it into the soil. It improves the conditions of the soil. The organisms say thank you. We're feeling better now. The plants are feeling better, and the slugs don't have to come in and gobble up as much of the stuff that we used to have to go out and try to prevent. So it's the same thing in the body. It's about treating the ecology, and of course Beauchamp, long ago, who was probably we could call the father of terrain medicine, not theory. Conventional medicine with germ theory, that's a theory.
Yeah.
That's a theory.
Yeah.
Terrain is not a theory. If as just sitting here in nature and observing how everything works on the farm, it's proof that this is the way things naturally work.
Yeah.
And Deb, being kind of the master green thumb of the family, that has not gone through all the medical training, but understands it probably better than most doctors on the planet.
Absolutely.
And also played kind of a similar role with you, kind of watching me from afar, but also managing our clinics and, talking to clients and really reading between the lines and understanding what's really making them ill. Because about 80% of what makes us ill is our toxic emotions and belief systems and so forth.
Yep.
So, but now we're all getting to play out in the garden, which is Deb's first love and kind of been my mentor out there as well. So, how would you, just put all this from your perspective?
Well, I'd say for the lay person, but for gardeners and farmers alike, who are connected day in, day out, the original relationship, if you will, is the human body with plants. That is the original relationship on the earth. And in not so long ago, before the drug industry captured a great amount of the so-called healing, hospitals used to have greenhouses and gardens for people to go to that were recovering. The plants themselves generously transmit healing energy. That's why you can feel terrible, go out, work in your garden, and everything can shift for you because you're out of your brain and you're into your heart. And the gift of nature, again, is just the healing qualities that every plant has. It doesn't matter if it's a weed, what we call a weed, or what label we want to put on it. Mother Nature gives us her gifts. And unfortunately, with the development across the globe, and especially so many people around electronics now, not even knowing, young children not even knowing where milk comes from or where food comes from, we're at the tipping point, I think, for all of us right now to come full circle back to the earth. And I'm really seeing a lot of people going back into herbal medicine, a huge resurgence of people that work with plants in the healing arts. It's great to see, and that will be the balance point for our planet and our relationship with the earth. It must happen. It has to happen.
Do you want to say a couple words about the concept of a physic garden and what doctors used to do?
Oh, you go ahead, sweetie.
Well, my favorite studies are going back a few centuries, and the original chemist or scientist, who now are known as alchemists, understood both sides of the equation. Doctors and the things I had to endure in my medical studies were brought into this more of a materialistic notion, and unlike an Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, where they appreciate the pervading chi, prana, God, whatever you're comfortable with. It's the glue that not only holds everything together but animates things in the first place. So you become very aware of that, when you are practicing agriculture and, the way we do it here. Also practicing medicine the way your dad did. And we're, now reconnecting with our roots of those initial practitioners that not only understood all this, but they brought it to a high level of science where they could mimic what nature was doing in their laboratories for, more efficient, more effective plant medicines and everything. But they really understood more than anything. It was a way for them to reconnect themselves and expand their awareness, feed their own soul. And it also, made me aware that all these physicians of old, scientists, period, their main endeavor was to heal themselves on all levels and help other people do the same. Whereas scientists these days are more about picking things apart and trying to find life in particles rather than understanding the life that animates those particles and puts them here in the first place.
Yep.
So they knew they had to grow their own plants in order to be part of that entire chain of creation.
Yep.
So it starts with agriculture, getting your hands in the dirt. And so they didn't buy their stuff online that somebody else made. They had what was known as a physic garden. Grew their plants, got to know their plants from day one. When I look at the herbs and things I grow, and if I'm, questioned by somebody, well, what herb should I take? I don't think in terms of little chemical constituents that people have isolated in the laboratory. I'm looking at the personality of that plant. I'm looking at the personality of the individual that needs help.
Yep.
I'm looking at the morphology of the plant, because just the way it grows, its shape, its characteristics tell you everything about, on a deeper fundamental level, how it works. And then when you look at an individual as a physician, you can match things up very, very well that way.
Yeah.
So now your dad was really pioneered a level of microscopy, and I think we had some similar roots in that we learned the old school technique from Germany, Belgium, Gaston Naessons, and studied all about Gunther Enderlein, who developed the first microscope, and hung out with all those kind of folks. Maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about how their microscopes worked and what your dad did that was very unique.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I'll piggyback on some of the things you were talking about, the plant medicine, and it's definitely making a comeback. But I don't think a lot of the people understand that you don't have to be ingesting the plant all the time to get medicine from the plants. Mm-hmm. You just be around it, just be around the trees, And we were talking about the secret life of plants the other day,
yes.
And just the interrelationships.
Right.
And the farmers I work with in Spain talked about the most important thing we have to do is observe. You observe nature and you see how it works and see the familial relationships that they have. So even though we're taking in an herb and using it, there was a whole relationship that herb had with that environment right there. Mm-hmm. So how are you juggling those herbs together? And they talked about, modern day lumber, where they take down a whole grove of trees and they plant one tree. They plant 50 acres worth of cedar. So it's like you're taking out the whole family and then you're just planting the father. Well, the father has no family that it can create at that point in time. You wonder why those trees never mature the way they're supposed to, because you've taken out their familial relationships. And they did studies on stumps that have been, dead for a couple hundred years, and there's things growing out of them, and they found that the trees and the plants around them were providing that stump energy, even though they were totally different species. So that, in that interconnection just with plants and the environment is so important. So for me, we talk about it. I don't really take much anymore in the way of external medicine. I'll take some cell salts here and there. When something acute's going on, I'll take some of the isopathics. But just being here, and just getting my hands on the soil, even putting tea in the bag was kind of medicine for me. You know, and I think sometimes that gets lost in the translation these days. And not to mention, and I'll get to the blood a little bit, the words are power that Emoto talked about it. And we've talked about this with the herbalist calling the herb antibacterial or antifungal. This is not the way nature works. Nature doesn't evolve through antagonism. It's all symbiotic. So if words are power, I believe they're actually weakening the energy of the herb before you even put it in your body by calling it anti-anything. So if anything, it's pro-bacteria. It's pro-inflammatory. It's pro-fungal, pro-parasitic. You know, so there's a bit of a fundamental misunderstanding of these people coming up and using these words, and I think it's an important piece to the puzzle.
And just a quick comment I'd like you to respond to is behind all the antagonistic kind of mindset, there's more than just a little bit of fear. So maybe what happens when fear is a motive for taking anything?
Yeah, but that's supposedly what is the lowest frequency we could have is fear, and it's used to control us these days. So, you know, even when I look at the blood, there's nothing that scares me in there. It's just this is the body telling you certain things that need attention. You know, so yeah, we don't get anywhere. We don't evolve through fear. We get controlled by fear. You know, so it does not come into our equation. And you know, Dad was, you know, used to working as you were too, probably with the worst of the worst of the worst. They'd been through traditional medicine and been destroyed. They've been through alternative medicine and not gotten what they needed. Then they find you and they find my dad, and they come unpetrified. And the one thing that he really did that I really loved was he took the fear out of them. You know, they still might be going through something really heavy, but at least he helped them understand it and helped them understand why it was happening and then steps they could hopefully do to start to reverse that. You know, and that's where, for us, that's where the microscope came in. So the traditional microscope is a light phase where the light goes directly through the slide. Dark field splits the beams, which is the exact way a hologram is made. So if you look at, it's very basic, but dolphins or bats using echolocation, they throw out an energy field, it hits a disturbance field, then you get an imprint of the disturbance field, and that's the way our microscopes are designed. So they've been doing dark field for, God, it's only about 150 years now, maybe? So not very long. But when they would see these images in the microscope that were larger than the cells, they didn't realize they were holograms. They thought they were artifacts. They were dirt on the slide. Well, those dirt on the slide tend to look like organs. They tend to look like something that's going on in the person's body. So when Dad had his first teacher, she kept picking up what the root cause of the person's issue was by looking at these holograms. And the root cause of the issue was not a germ. You know, there was always some sort of dysbiosis in there that set the person off center. So he didn't believe it because he's a left brain scientist. You know, this is just dirt on the slide. But she's like, there's a broken arm right there. Can't you see that? She's taken out the anatomy books. So over the process of about a year, she's doing this over and over and over again until he realizes she's just reading patterns, right? And that's exactly what we do. Now, I never knew any different. You know, I kind of just grew up in it. So we've attempted to train some people in the past, but it's hard to get through what they've been trained. We do see lots of things coming up these days with a lot of bad guesses based on what these holograms are, and we're not going to really get into that for now. But the blood, just like the ear, just like the eye, just like the foot, has a hologram in it. And it relates to certain parts of the body. So all we're doing when we're reading the blood is we're reading what your body is telling us is needed.
Yeah.
And it's nice and simplistic.
And, you know, we talk a lot about the fact that we live in a unified realm. You know, we have the sky clock above that is emanating resonance all the time. It's an electrical system. We have, through the constellations, you know, you have a modification or modulation of that energy or that electricity. Then that electricity is received on the ground by all the capacitors. Capacitors in electricity are things that gather and store energy, receive it. We're capacitors. We're receiving that resonance all the time. And just basic understanding these days, you know, we have something that people talk about a lot. It's called cymatics. That means if you create a resonance and, you know, like particles of sand on a plate will coalesce into a very specific geometric form with that same resonance every single time. So it's not a matter of conjecture anymore that form and function is created by the geometry that is in turn created by resonance. So bringing that full circle back to the microscope and things that, you know, your dad pioneered, doesn't it make sense that if something, a resonant field that is created by our own little prism, you know, in our consciousness, it's, you know, our emotions, our beliefs and things, is not only going to create a certain specific change in form and function, but then, as the old alchemists knew, as above, so below. So doesn't that resonance have to affect every single thing, including little shapes and forms in the plasma?
It has to. It has to. And even, you know, we'll see images, and we don't talk about this often, about, you know, we'll see images off the blood that's on the slide. That's almost like it's in their biofield, and it's certainly correlating to what's going on in their body. And it's like, why am I seeing a colon over here? You know, and sometimes it's a way of the person isn't ready to deal with that, right? So it's just off on the ethers. On the other side, are they drawing it in because they are ready to deal with it? So, and that's kind of the puzzle pieces we have to put together. But yeah, it could be dirt on the slide, but just like cymatic, it's actually forming into something very specific based on what's going on in their energy field. Yeah, very straightforward.
Pretty logical.
I'd say out of all the people over the years of patient care, the easiest and the ones that heal very rapidly, at least that's our experience, are children. Because they have not had a lifetime of rigidity, belief systems, programming, hypnosis, if you will. Children will shift and make those changes, and
We saw amazing
almost
miracles.
instantly. Yeah, we did. We were very blessed to see a lot of children heal rapidly. One or two treatments sometimes, and it completely shifted.
Yeah.
And so, what you're talking about are when you become older, and again I use the word rigid because that's, I'd say, was the block always, are these the inability for adults particularly to just get out of their head, trust, know there's a plan, and the body is a garden, and have you been taking care of your garden? What have you done to your garden? You know, how's your emotional garden feeling? How's the physical? Are you treating it with respect and kindness? Again, it always leads back, for me, it leads back to the relationship with the earth.
Well, the more we sever our connection with nature, of course, we lose, number one, trust. When you're living in an artificial environment, you're inundated with energetic overlays created by cell towers and God knows what. When your body has pharmaceuticals in it that change the resonance tremendously, override, you know, the natural rhythms. All these things, you know, just always being on a schedule, being preoccupied with doing something you don't like every day because you think you need to make money. Well, now you're so divorced from the natural realm, and I appreciate that, you know, people are in that situation, and you know, I think it's kind of a contrived control grid. But that aside, without that constant conscious understanding of the interplay between ourselves and nature, you become very dependent on all these synthetic artifacts, and lose the ability just to look and see what's in front of your eyes in nature and realize, you know, everything's okay, which would also tell you how things work out there, and the fact that it works the same within us, which goes right back to you know, holograms.
How we both been working for years, basically.
Now, I worked more traditional terrain microscopy, where I was more preoccupied with looking at, you know, the little pleomorphic changes, how these organisms morphologically change into different stages to provide certain functions. And that was important to me, you know, as I integrated that with other kinds of tests to understand what's going on in the body. Now, when I started hearing about your dad's work, and then especially watching you here today, well, since you've been here the last few days, it really helps me appreciate even deeper that all the other things that I'm interested in and have integrated in my work, including, in my alchemical lab and so forth, looking at the holograms in the blood is really a deeper appreciation than just maybe all the years where I was just focused in on the organisms themselves and their byproducts, which is very helpful, and it helped me, help other people. But the next level, as far as I'm concerned, is exactly what you guys have been doing a long time. And you and I have had a few discussions as we're looking at things together under the microscope on how we can maybe employ other modalities to help to help interpret what those holograms are really telling us, and to have maybe be able to elaborate on their story a little bit more.
Yeah, there's so much in there that I don't know, that I'll never know. And Dad was very, it was like a drill instructor where you have to be honest about what you know and honest about what you don't know.
Yeah.
And the puzzle pieces are always there. And that's the brilliance of his work was, you're looking at holograms, but you're looking at the activity. You look at the shapes of the red cells. You look at what the biomes are doing. So there's a symbiosis that's going on in there, but it's pointing you in a certain direction, and you have to be able to figure out what road to take to get to that point. So it's really putting those puzzle pieces together. So, yeah, I might see, a giant platelet over here, which represents some area of trapped inflammation. And for all of those out here who don't know, inflammation is good for you. It's how we heal. Trapped inflammation is when we start to have some issues. So I might see a giant platelet, so I'll know there's some trapped inflammation, but that's only telling me a piece of the puzzle. But now if I'm seeing a scar disturbance right next to it, then the uterus, then I can start to put the puzzle pieces together that, maybe there was a procedure done in that area that's contributing to the trapped inflammation in the area. So we've got to break down those dams and let the body start to flow properly. So it's easy to pick up on certain holograms. Putting the puzzle pieces together is really the art of what my dad did. And it's like a dance you're doing in there. And when you start to put the puzzle pieces together, it starts to get exciting. I talk out loud to myself when I'm reading blood. Sometimes I'll look at it the next day, but it's like, okay, I know that's a piece of the puzzle. I don't know how it fits in right now, but I'm going to file that in the back of my brain, and it'll come full circle by the end. So by the end of our reading, the answer is there. And if the answer isn't there, that means I missed it, because the answer is always there. All I'm doing is reading the holographic interpretation of what's going on in your terrain.
Yeah.
And then you have throughout history, and it's not discussed that much unless people have exhausted the allopathic method, but think of all the different tools, if you will, or modalities that have come forward. For instance, how many years of acupuncture that unblock channels. Of course, the herbal remedies. There's been really incredible tools that have come forward and could be utilized to help with that. I think every doctor should know how to do a myriad of those tools.
Yeah.
And be able to, whatever the body needs, know what it needs at that time and to help it don't block, just keep it moving, keep that flow happening.
Yeah, we got to get the river flowing again.
And I don't understand it from Bear's experience. I just can feel it, and a lot of people can feel it. That's one thing about being in practice all those years is most people would find their way to him when they had been educating themselves and knew that there was alternatives out there. And logically, that makes sense. The way they find their way to your dad, to you and your brother.
Yep.
There are other choices, and I would encourage anybody, don't stop searching. Know that trust your instinct.
And the sooner the better. I loved what you said about the children. And then as we get older, we become rigid. Because, children were so much easier to take care of. Even Robert Fulford, who you were kind of aware of, a wonderful osteopath, but as he got older, he wouldn't treat you if you're over the age of 12. Because he didn't want to deal with the adults' crap anymore. Right? He just didn't want to deal with that.
Oh, 12 was it. That's
that
usually,
was
11,
it.
12, that's where that brain really kicks in.
Yeah.
And the trust as a child seems to diminish quite a bit.
Hormones get involved a little bit. If you can catch it before
that's
those
great.
teeth solidify, it made a big difference.
Well, how many patients did we have that they bring their children in and we'd say, well, actually, we have to treat you
Yeah.
Yes.
because the
Yep.
child is manifesting your ills.
Yep.
Yes.
And if you don't clean up your act, then we can only have limited success with your child.
And then that's the Hawaiian. That was the
Ho'oponopono.
Ho'oponopono.
Yep.
Same thing. Someone was expressing illness in the family. Well, it wasn't just that person. They had to. The whole family needed shifting
Yep.
and
Yep.
change.
Yep.
So yes, we're all connected, and everything is connected. So.
Yeah, you always had to. Dad realized with the heavy cases, you had to treat the whole family because they were
Right.
reacting to what was going on. If the child was sick, he knew it was a lesson for the parents. And did the parents get that lesson?
Also, in the so-called natural healing arts, we have to understand that even, acupuncture, for instance, the old masters a couple thousand years ago weren't just sticking needles in people. They were setting bones, like osteopathy.
Yeah.
They were masters at reading your energy. They could read you like a book. They could put their hands on other parts of your body and know what's going on in every part of your body. They were master herbalists, understood herbs from more of that, comprehensive energetic level. And so now, you get little bits of that, but it's just like conventional allopaths. People are more specialized.
Yeah.
Ayurvedic practitioners back in the day understood the principles of transmutation. So if the body was lacking something and needed that something, it would take what was available, something else, and transmute it into what it needed, which brings us to more recent times where folks like Walter Russell now are explaining, so our Western minds can understand how all of nature works in cycles, and how everything from elements in the ground that we would think of as separate elements on the periodic table of chemistry are actually a state of fluctuating resonance, and all of those elements will then transmute into another distinctly different element when the resonance change by its movement through the different octaves, which is the way everything operates in our realm from up above to down in the ground.
Yeah, that's classic pleomorphism.
Yeah.
Changing based on the environment to what it needs.
Which reminds me of the conversation we had about the forests. So I was sharing it with Josh, and he knew this as well, that there was I read a few years back, there was a forester from Europe who wrote a book, and that he had recognized that in a forest, that the trees actually communicated with each other through the root systems. And that if one tree was in distress, there was a weakness, or it was being attacked by a certain, a bug, something that was doing harm, it could send out the messages to the rest of the forest, and they would already adapt and be able to repel any of the damage that this tree was experiencing. So again, we're not separate. Everything adapts and communicates with each other. I've always known that nature communicated, but that one was just knocked me out when I heard that. I thought that was the greatest thing I'd ever discovered in reading.
Now, try to fathom that the kingdom of mankind, which is the highest pinnacle of creation within this realm, and the steward over the other three kingdoms, the mineral, plant, and animal kingdom, which means we have all the attributes of all those kingdoms, including the plant kingdom and the trees communicating. So do we think that somehow as individuals, whether we're here sitting with each other or a few thousand miles away on a different continent, that we aren't affecting each other somehow? And what if we were all taught to be at odds with each other and to really look at each other adversarial, in that perspective, and so we're always talking about, is peace on this planet possible? And we're looking at politicians and military and everybody as solutions to bring about world peace. Well, it really starts with each one of us individually to have a light bulb come on and say, well, let's at least not be part of the problem, and start thinking in that manner so that we can maybe start turning this thing around.
I think that's a good. I think that's a good summary of it. Is peace within, and then radiate peace without.
Yeah.
And that's the hope for our future.
Yeah. Well, and nature does nothing in isolation.
No.
Even though they've tried to isolate us recently, it does nothing in isolation. So you kind of need that whole unit to evolve. And we've become so disconnected from nature. You know, and there was a couple of little things I'll finish up on that the farmers noticed, that they said when animals became domesticated, they ate for taste. And in the wild, they eat for health. And we watched on this farm, the cows would go out and they had us analyze what each cow was eating. And the cows that had bad bowels going on, they were all going over to this one plant because they knew they'd ate too much of this plant, so they needed this to self-medicate. So the animals inherently knew what was good for them. But once they became domesticated, they're just lining up for their feed bags. They're eating for taste. Right? And the other part of it, in this world where everybody likes to have an external input as opposed to working internally, and we talked about this, when they started to supplement their soil, that the roots developed very shallow roots on the plants, and they stopped developing mycorrhizal connections down below. So all those important nutrients that those roots would be going down to search for weren't in the plant, right? Because you were giving them supplements on top. So it was one of those things, you know, we're not supplement people, but how is long-term supplements in your own body, what is that, what kind of connection is that going to inhibit? As part of our own internal nature. You know, so as opposed to being afraid to make these connections, we're so disconnected that we're actually cutting off these connections to things that are symbiotic with us. So if we can get back into nature and observe how it works a little bit, then it might give us some lessons that we forgot.
And likewise, the consciousness is operating on that level of superficiality. It's not just making ourselves weaker by what you're describing, but also that isolation, or the perception of isolation, is, let's just say, impeding our ability to grow roots into other realms of consciousness that would bring us all the way home. Yeah.
So I think that
Very simplistic.
now that we've solved all the world's issues, we'll go out here, radiate more peace, and I've got some seeds to plant today. Actually.
Go play in the garden. Go swim in the river.
I've got an area we call the salad bowl, and it gets partial sun because up here we hit triple-digit temperatures. So I've got a second round of salad going in, but in a different location. The lettuce is too tender. Needs some shade.
One last thing I'd like a comment from you, Josh, is we talked a little bit about our mission statement here at Alpha Vedic Farms, but how about the Bigelsen Academy? What are you guys up to, and tell us about your direction and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, it's all about education. You know, we're doing the same exact thing. We're just more correlated to what's going on in the body. But really, we're kind of doing the same exact thing. We're trying to teach people how the body works. We're trying to teach people how nature works. It's part of the reason I'm getting into the crossover with some of the farmers I've been working with. Some of the farmers we've interviewed, is they understand more about health, human health, than doctors do. And part of that's by default, but they really understand what's going on in nature. So, you know, our goal is to educate. You know, while we'll still do consultations, you know, people can send us their blood and we'll do consultations for them. The goal is to really educate people so they don't get sick, but so they understand how nature works, so they understand how we are not separate than nature. So we'll do monthly webinars, we'll interview wonderful people like yourself. The list of people we can interview is getting shorter because there's only so many people out there that we really resonate with. You know, we've interviewed some really wonderful farmers too, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, the goal at this point is education. Teach people how the body works. We are no different than nature. The worm's good in the garden. The worm's good in our body. It's doing a very specific job.
I like that one. Sounds like a new bumper sticker.
There you go. You know how many people we'd offend with that one?
And we're creating our own networks in the process. We're all finding each other through resonance. We find who we resonate with, and I think we're off to a good start. With really making some good changes, and then we're also living at a time where all that doesn't work is very evident to anybody that opens their eyes.
Yeah.
And I think what we're all trying to do is to provide a soft landing for folks that want to try something different.
And then that's one thing we don't do is we don't talk about what the problem is.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be 30 seconds here just so people know what we're talking about, but there's plenty of people out there talking about what the problem is, and we're not interested anymore.
Yeah.
Right? We're looking at solutions, and the solutions are going back to nature.
Yeah.
Well, you
Understanding how it
hear
works.
self-sustainable used that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, self-sustainable is life itself,
Yep.
and I believe that the methods of being unsustainable,
Yep.
they'll just take care of themselves. They'll just have to. I mean, they won't be able to continue.
Yep.
Whether it's the human body, the earth itself, wherever there's the damage done, there's solution.
Yep.
But the other will just, it'll just.
It's not going to provide the solution.
It's not gonna and it's not going to last either. So.
Yep. Yeah, Dad wrote a great article back in the '90s called "Don't Call Him Alternative," and the point was there is no alternative to the way nature works.
Right.
This is
oh,
it.
I like that. That's great.
And it's very, very
Yeah.
simple. So,
Yeah,
That's
but,
great.
we're trying to educate people on how nature works, and the more I get to hang out with you guys, get my hands in the garden, the more I get to talk to the farmers, the more it all fits perfectly into what we're trying to achieve.
Well, thanks for being with us
Yeah,
here.
thanks.
It's been a
Awesome.
lot of
It's been a
fun,
great
and
visit.
I know we'll be in cahoots for many years to come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really enjoyed
Awesome.
it. Really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Thanks,
What
Josh.
you guys are doing out here is what we all should be doing in some form.
Yeah.
Getting back to the land, working with the soil, getting our hands dirty.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, you're welcome to come here and get your hands dirty anytime you want.
Anytime.
I had a good time.
Okay.